Hi, I'm Joanne Kovacay. I'm your midlife coach and the founder of Midlife Rewritten. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Sharon Walt. Sharon is a certified functional medicine health coach. She combines her health expertise with her background as a former scientist to help women around the world with Hashimoto's thyroiditis and other autoimmune disorders. Sharon helps them regain their health and start living their life to the max using a holistic approach that addresses not just the symptoms, but the causes of the disorders as well. Sharon, thank you so much for being here today. I really
thank you for having me.
appreciate it, especially because I know you've been recovering from a cold, and I can tell with your voice that you're still hanging on there.
Yeah, this is one of the, probably one of the benefits of getting the cold is that I have what I call my Marlene Dietrich voice.
I know, I used to call it my Lauren Bacall voice.
Yes, there you go. Yeah.
Oh gosh, well, I really enjoyed the opportunity to get to know you a little bit when I was at the Women's Economic Forum in New Delhi. And, it was just such a treat to be able to sit down and talk with you about your work and, your background. So as you know, our audience is primarily midlife women. And what I try to do in these series is to highlight, the personal struggles that we all go through in that kind of midlife phase, because it really is helpful to women to see that they're not the only ones, that other women struggle with the same kinds of things, and to get some sense for how they cope and how they work through those things. And so if we can kind of start from there, you were telling me about your work as a scientist and how at a certain point things changed in your work environment, and try as you might to get it to smooth itself out, it didn't. And you ended up in such a stressful position that you knew you had to make a change. And so can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, it was probably one of the hardest points in my life, and especially in my career, because I have to admit, I think I've had a pretty blessed life, that either things have just kind of dropped into my lap, or I've always made the right choice and have really enjoyed where life's taken me. And there's been a few zigs and zags in the career, but always being able to pick up the stuff that I needed to know to move on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. So it was a bit of it hit me pretty hard when I finally was up against something that I didn't think, or after struggling for a couple of years, that I couldn't make work. I couldn't find a solution to make it work where I could stay in my job. Now, she mentioned that I was working as a scientist at one of the universities as an academic, so I was teaching and doing research and also running a lab at the same time. And without going into a lot of the grisly details about the hassles that I was having with a supervisor, I guess it was the unfairness of the situation where I was doing the best that I could, and apparently it just wasn't good enough. Although I knew that it was an unfair situation, and even taking it further, not being listened to by the people that could have made a difference. And I think that was the turning point right there, when I knew that it was an unfair situation, but I wasn't being listened to. At the time, I didn't really want to think about it, is because I was a woman of midlife, we'll use that term. And maybe it was just easier to dismiss me as not being, dismiss my concerns as being not probably important. But in any case, I had tried to solve the issue for a couple of years, and the stress that I was under, I was advised by a couple of counselors and my own GP to take some antidepressant medication, which at the time I thought, okay, well, this will solve some of the physiological effects of the stress. And actually what it did was just turn me into kind of a zombie.
Yeah.
And what I found out is that it couldn't have taken away the cause, because the cause of the stress was external. But it masked the physiological effects. And that was the thing that was a real surprise to me, because even though I wasn't feeling the stress, it was still having some physiological effects on me. And finally, to a situation or a time where I was almost asleep all the time. Like I'd get up, I would go to work, I'd fall asleep at my desk, like literally. Decide that I had to go home at lunchtime, and then I'd sleep all afternoon, eat, fall asleep again, and then repeat the next day. And this was, this wasn't sustainable at all. And I realized that it was the stress, that I hadn't been able to make a difference, to make it work. So the only solution left for me was to leave my position. So leave the career that I had been in for almost 20 years. And on the one hand, I recovered very quickly. So I knew that it was the right situation. But then I was in a situation where, okay, well, now what do I do? I still want to lead a fulfilling life. I still need to keep a roof over my head and food on the table, sort of thing. And that's where I thought, okay, well, a lot of people have to deal with high levels of stress, and they don't have the options that I have. Like they can't leave their employment. So is there something that I can do to help them? And that's how I got into health coaching. So it was a little bit of a pivot. I could still use a lot of the skills that I had developed as a scientist. Only instead of teaching, hundreds of students, I was working one-on-one with people. And then when I was initially starting with that, I was running into a lot of women who had Hashimoto. So that's a thyroid condition. It's an autoimmune condition that affects everything. So you gain weight that you can't lose. You have a lot of confusion, memory problems, lack of focus, muscle aches and pains. So it can be quite debilitating. And they were really falling through the cracks of this. Traditional medicine doesn't tend to treat the causes of it. It's unfortunate, but they tend to treat the symptoms, where they just wait until you've got so much tissue damage in your thyroid gland, that they will then give you supplementary thyroid hormone that you have to take for the rest of your life. Sometimes this works, but it doesn't treat the cause. And one of the things, if you have one autoimmune condition, you are 30% more likely to then develop another one, because the cause is the same thing. So then you can go on to develop types of arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, fibromyalgia. So these are all other autoimmune conditions. So that's when I realized, oh, wait a minute, I actually can be a lot more use doing that. So anyways, that was kind of a long story to explain how I got where I am now.
Well, I appreciate that. Autoimmune diseases are challenging, from what I can tell, because there's a whole issue of trying to identify what is it actually that's going on, because those symptoms that you're describing could be a lot of different things. And if it comes on in midlife or beyond, doctors are easily, wanted to dismiss those things as well. You're just getting old and you just have to learn to live with those things. But so initially, I would think getting the diagnosis is difficult. And then, as you say, if all they're trying to do is just treat the symptoms and not deal with what the underlying issues are that cause it, then you are, as you say, vulnerable to other things as life goes on, and that makes it very difficult. So. In
a lot of cases right now, I'm not blaming the GPs. It sounds like I'm, really putting the boot into medical practitioners, when it's not really the case. It's our whole health system is set up to treat not chronic disorders, but to treat more immediate things, and which you can do in a 15-minute consultation. Right. But obviously you can't get to what the causes are of a disorder in 15 minutes. It takes a lot longer. You've got to take a holistic approach to it to find out what's triggering it.
And so you were able to make this pivot. You found that for yourself, once you were out of that extremely stressful situation, that you were able to rebound and those symptoms went away, and it made you realize that, well, clearly that wasn't a place you needed to be anymore, because that was destroying your life and your health. And so, So you were, as you say, you were fortunate to be able to make that pivot into something that could use most of your existing skills and would still allow you to keep a roof over your head, as you say.
Yeah.
So was that a hard transition in terms of how you saw yourself before before you were a scientist and you were part of academia, and then, as you left that space, what was that like?
Wow, that was hard because, like you said, my identity was as a scientist,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always been a perfectionist. So that combination of being a perfectionist and having your identity on what you're doing and not necessarily who you are was quite a hard thing. And it took me quite a while. Like, even though I am so grateful for what I am doing now, for this path to have opened for me, there's still a big sense of failure at not being able to resolve the situation and still do what I'd love to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of an eye-opener for me because I had never actually been up against that before.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was a bit, not so much now, still a little bit now, but there's still that sense of shame that I wasn't able to make it work.
Oh, wow.
But again, if that's part of life's little lessons, and I had to wait until I'm, my age right now to learn it, in one way, it's made me a lot more understanding and have a lot more empathy and compassion to my clients and also just the people around me.
It's
so I'm
interesting.
trying to think the good thing.
You talk about shame. There are so many things that we women attach shame to, when personally I think it's the wrong thing, right? In that, I don't know, I guess we're conditioned to think that if we don't accomplish things and if we don't do this or we don't do that, there's a certain amount of shame involved. But under the circumstances, based on what you were telling me, it was an insurmountable problem that was totally outside of your control. And so I understand the sense of shame, but yet, I kind of bristle at that when you think, because it's not like it's something you had control over and you didn't do what you needed to do to get there, and for something like that, maybe the sense of the shame of not doing the best that you could comes into play. But so often we women feel shame over things that there's no reason to be ashamed to feel shameful
and
about.
I totally agree with you there. And I think, again, it's that combination of being a perfectionist, which I think so many women, if they're not there naturally, feel compelled to be everything to everybody and to never fail. And I've had to take that on board. Well, is that because of my upbringing? Because just that I'm a woman, and it was so easy for other people to dismiss me as a woman of a certain age. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And I was reading an article recently about women in academia, women in science in particular, and they were talking about how amazingly unfair the treatment is. And they were giving examples. They were even talking about lab space and the fact that the women in a department have so much smaller lab space than the men, and their equipment is generally not as the same caliber, and all of these different kinds of things that are it's so difficult to fight that kind of thing, because you're made to sound just like some bitchy old lady who's complaining because her lab is a little too small.
Exactly, that you're being hysterical, and they treat you that way.
You get labeled like that, and then and unfortunately, because it's usually men that have the control in those settings, there are very few women that have made it up into those echelons of academia where they are making the decisions about things. And so, it's extremely challenging. And yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, I'd always had this impression, and I totally understand how naive I was to hold this impression that in academia, things would be very objective and would be fair, without realizing, well, okay, the science is probably fair, but the humans behind it aren't necessarily that way.
Right.
And then to find out that being treated unfairly and not being able to fight against it successfully, I think was the hard part.
Yeah, because there's nowhere to turn. You exhaust
Exactly.
your options, and then that's it. There isn't anywhere to go. And it's challenging. I sent the article to one of my daughters because she's in the sciences, and she's considering where the next step is to go for her. She's just newly out of college, and so I said, well, just be forewarned.
And sometimes that is really, really useful, just to know it's not so much that you have to be paranoid to watch your back, but you do have to be aware of let's say, other people's agendas.
So did you take a hiatus after leaving academia and to try to, dig through some of that stuff so that you could kind of get your head back on straight?
Yeah, it was probably about 6 months. So it wasn't a huge amount of time, but 6 months. And then someone had mentioned to me, well, think about becoming a health coach. And so it was over the next probably 3 years that I was able to take, excuse me, sorry, the cough is still there.
Yes.
That I was able to take extra courses and get my certifications. So it's still ongoing because there is so much to know about human physiology and the interconnections. I find it really fascinating. And that in itself has been such an eye-opener for me that I can still get excited about learning new things.
Oh, yes. Isn't that wonderful, though? There's always new things to learn if we just allow ourselves to explore, and that we don't mind being a beginner. I think when we get to a certain level, we know what we're doing, and, we kind of like being the person who has the answers. And then we kind of cut ourselves off, from new learning experiences where we kind of have to start at the bottom and work our way up again. But sometimes life just gives us a boot and pushes us out there, whether we like it or not.
Absolutely. And, thinking back, this is about 4 or 5 years out from, when things had to change, that I'm actually starting to be quite grateful that things unfolded the way they did, and realize that there were warning signals beforehand, but I had been ignoring them. So sometimes, like you said, life has to give you a really swift boot to get you going in the right direction again.
Yeah, sometimes it's like that. And it is, I think, as you say, in hindsight is always 20/20, as they say, but you do, when you look back on your life's path and you realize, gosh, all those things are happening to kind of move me to where I am today. And I had no idea that those things were in play until much later, when you can analyze it and go, oh, I get it now.
Yeah. And I think one of the most important things was just the pure joy of being able to discover new things. And I feel that so many people, not just women, but men too, they realize they come to an age in life where it's, I can't do this, or, I'm just not capable of learning new stuff, when you should have the confidence by now.
Yeah, for all the things that we've done, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Stuff that earlier on I wouldn't have taken on board as easily. I now have some of the experience beforehand, said, okay, well, this is where all of this fits in.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not just using memory on things, but actually being able to more readily connect the dots and bring in certain pieces again. And actually, that's pretty exciting.
It's very exciting. It's very exciting. I think so much of it has to do with your mindset. It's kind of an overused word these days, but really it's what it all boils down to, right? I think it's Henry Ford that has that quote that says, if you think you can't, you won't.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's true, you know, if you listen to all those naysayers in the media and, you know, in your own maybe circle,
Oh, and even in your own head sometimes too. Yeah.
yes, that
Yeah.
you just you, you just kind of shrink down to this little thing, you know, over time if you're not careful, and you really have to push back at that and say, you know, there is no reason why I can't do this if this is what I choose. I'm smart. I have all these life experiences and all this evidence that I'm capable and I can do things. So why the hell not can't I do that? And it's crazy. It's crazy. And I think that's where it's really important to surround yourself with people who have that same mindset and who will support you, who you can reach out to and say, you know, I'm kind of feeling down today. You know, and they can say, hey, look, you know, here is all the evidence for why you shouldn't have any problem. So move forward.
And that was one of the things that I had to learn. And I think that was because of some of the ongoing feelings I had about being a failure, that I felt, okay, well, I really got to prove myself. And, you know, I realized actually probably within the last year that I could have made things so much easier if I had reached out to the right people to get the support that I needed, or just even finding out what support was going to be more useful to me instead of trying to do it all myself.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the hardest lessons that I had to learn.
It's hard to ask for help. You know, our society doesn't encourage that. We're told, you know, you got to do it yourself. You got to, you know, figure it out on your own because you can't look weak in front of other people. And it's the kind of male model of how you succeed in life. You know, you just bully your way through.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't ask for help.
Yeah, when it makes so much more sense to surround yourself with mastermind groups or collaborative teams, or just a few like-minded people. And I'm really, really fortunate. I've got a few of those people in my life, where this one friend of mine who's also an entrepreneur in allied health practice. When we get together, we just start bouncing ideas off of one another. And it doesn't matter if we're kind of in a down mood when we first get together. By the time that we're finished, my God, we're ready to take on the world.
Ready to go. Yeah.
And it's so important to find those people.
It is. It really is. Particularly for women entrepreneurs. It's, you know, so many times I've been in groups with other women entrepreneurs and they say, oh, I'm so grateful that I have this group because I can talk about things here that I can't talk about to other people because they don't get it or they don't care, or, you know, it's just like not in their wheelhouse. It's like, what are you talking about? Why are you so excited, or why are you so upset? And that's tough, you know, if you don't have people in your life who understand what you're talking about, who kind of speak your language. So, yeah.
So I'm really very grateful that I've got a number of women right now that I can.
That's really great.
Yeah.
That's really great. So tell me a little bit more about the work that you do with your clients. I would think that by the time they find you, they are, they've been through a lot, and they're probably quite ecstatic to hear that there's potentially a cure for not just their symptoms, but for the disease itself, perhaps.
Yeah, usually by the time they find me, some of them are actually quite sick, to the point where they've had to give up working. And so they're under quite a bit of financial strain. And of course, the stress of that just further triggers the autoimmune condition. So what I'm trying to do is a little bit more education. And I was quite fortunate. I had a magazine article, just a short one, that was put out a couple of months ago, where basically just talked about the symptoms of Hashimoto's, because it's not a term that people readily identify with at all. I mean, I didn't even know about it until 2 years ago. And it affects about 10% of all women. So it's not one of these little niche diseases. It's actually quite widespread. And I've had a lot of people come and say, well, hey, this sounds like what I've got. What can we do? So initially, or just have a short conversation with them to see if it's something that I can help them with. Because sometimes they will have other medical conditions that are well beyond my field of expertise. So I really do need to send them on to someone else. But it's also a lot of the things that they need to change are lifestyle and diet. And these are really, really hard. And if they're not willing to make those changes themselves, then I can't help them because I don't have the magic wand.
Right.
They're the ones that have to do all the heavy lifting. All I'm doing is suggesting, okay, this is what I think is what's happening. Here is one thing to address it.
Right.
And I think most people recognize if you've got to make some major changes to not only what you're eating, but how you're eating, that not only affects you, but it can have effects on your family.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be quite overwhelming. So the idea is to try and find maybe a series of small changes that they'll start seeing some results and give them the confidence to start making the bigger changes that they have to make.
Yeah.
But I always start out with diet because that's fundamentally, a lot of the root cause. Now, there can be other things leading on from that later on that can be nutritional deficiencies or even some other genetic component that, yes, we can look at other supplements that might be able to help them through that as well. But initially, let's say when I first have that 15-minute conversation, we decide that we're going to go forward. They fill out a fairly comprehensive health history, give me copies of any blood tests they've had in the last couple of years if they have it. And I will try and piece together, because it's kind of a puzzle piece, trying to figure out what the most likely triggers are. And then we'll have an initial consultation, usually lasts about 90 minutes, just to go over, and I can give them a couple things to get started on right away. And then it's have a follow-up afterwards to see if they've had some improvement, make some tweaks. And then it's up to them whether they want to go follow on with me. The important thing to get through to people is, especially when we're so used to having pharmaceuticals that are supposed to
fix everything for us.
Fix everything for us immediately. It can come as quite a shock that say, well, no, sometimes this can take 6 months to a year. There are no quick fixes. You know, no magic wand, no magic pill is going to fix it. It's taken a long time to develop, and it's going to take a little bit of time to try and figure out what the main cause is. And sometimes it's not just one cause, it's usually a number of different things that kind of hit in a perfect storm of health issues. So, So,
wow.
From my point of view, this is something that I really, really love to do. I mean, it's the fact that I can help people one-on-one is actually quite exciting, but it's also a really fascinating intellectual exercise to be able to look at all of the different symptoms and say, okay, where is this leading here? Or things like that. So.
That's interesting. So you get to still use that analytical skill that you had as a scientist. In your work.
So I really do feel quite fortunate. Not quite to the point where I can thank the university for, causing the situation in the first place, but
not quite ready to forgive him for that yet.
Not quite. But.
Oh gosh. Well, so what do you see ahead for you then?
Keep on doing what I'm doing. I've put together my first online course for clients. It's called Eating for Energy, which basically goes through an awful lot of the stuff that I would spend with the first month or so with my clients. So it's there. Quite frankly, I want to redo it again, but I'm going to wait until I get enough feedback from the people who are actually going to benefit from it to see how it can be improved. And I want to start a much larger one, because I know that a lot of people, especially if they've been sick for a while, they don't have the financial resources to hire me as a one-on-one coach, but maybe they can still make some initial gains by taking an online course and then catching up with me afterwards. And
I suppose there's also the possibility of a small group program as well, where it's not just where they're getting that interaction and that experiential work, because that I think that there's a lot to be gained by that group environment, just from the women being able to realize that they're not the only ones, that they're, and to be able to share with each other, the difficulties that they're going through, and to together work to improve their lives.
Yes, absolutely. And especially with it affecting so many women.
Yeah.
That's probably another step forward. And later on, I want to be able to approach some of the local GPs and see how receptive they are to working with me.
Right.
Part of it is making sure that they don't feel that I'm in competition with them. I'm just offering a service that they actually can't offer right now.
Right.
Because of the one-on-one time that I can spend with clients.
I would encourage you to approach the women doctors first.
Yes.
Because I have a hunch they'd be more open to collaboration than the men might be. Which might not
true
be
enough.
the correct thing to say, but there you go.
Yeah, so that's one thing. I've got to put my big girl panties on and and do that fairly soon.
Yeah.
So,
well, the fact that how you're able to help women, and the end result must be just a huge motivator to continue your work and to expand it to as many women as you can reach. So
yeah, and I'm really, really am excited about that. And so, occasionally there are some days when you feel,
yeah,
am I just banging my head against a brick wall here? But then there's so many other days when you realize that you can make a real difference to people's lives.
Yeah, that's what keeps you going. Well, I want to thank you so much, Sharon, for sharing your expertise and your experiences with us. It's really, it's such a great help to women in our audience to be able to hear, from real people, what they've gone through and how they've gotten through it, because it helps our audience, get a sense for what's possible for them. So I really want to thank you very much. It's really been fun as always.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. I have to admit, I really love talking about myself sometimes. So,
well, we all should have that opportunity once in a while. Oh, all right. Well, Sharon, thank you so much, and you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, and you as well.
Thank you. Bye. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. As a thank you for being here, I'd like to offer you my glorious Second Act workbook and planner. It's a great tool to help you gain clarity on what it is you want next in your life and to develop a plan to get you there. It's a totally free gift. The link is down below. So click the link, download your planner, and get started, taking action and creating a new and exciting second half to your life. I'm Joanne Kobike, your midlife coach. Stop by again for another episode of Modern Midlife. See you next time.